So, welcome to the end of the world. I hope it's treating you well. I'm here with AreCatsGay, aka
Hello.
Kitty F Cats. And right now, we are thinking to ourselves, it's the end of the world. What's the point of doing a podcast? Well, glad you asked. The point of doing a podcast at the end of the world isn't to document the end of the world, it's to let you escape from it. So, we're going to avoid the end of the world talk, no Corona talk. This might be a Corona cast, but it's not going to be a Corona podcast. We will be talking about our current favorite topic,
The
Trump checks.
yes, the it is a very interesting and popular yet universally divisive subject because although on in theory a lot of people on the right are opposed to the idea, at the same time I feel like it makes more sense under disaster circumstances like this than it does as just a general, all the time kind of thing. Like Yang Gang had the idea of let's do this all the time. I don't I don't know. I'm not an economist. I've heard the arguments, some of them are persuasive, but it just sounds like it wouldn't really work all the time. But as a emergency stimulus, as a way of keeping people who are losing their jobs because no one can go anywhere and do anything, it seems like a more like a transfusion, like a way to keep things moving at a snail pace
Well,
before.
well, the UBI, the Universal Basic Income that Yang Gang was proposing,
Or
would totally deplete our economy. Number one, and it would inflate our currency, but it would also really take people's will to work away. What this is, a lot of people like a lot of your favorites, actually probably no one that watches this really trusts Ben Shapiro anymore, but Ben Shapiro is saying this is like the bailouts, it's like the bailouts to the banks in the housing crisis. It's nothing like that. The banks caused the housing crisis. Their loans and also the government causing the banks to do predatory loans. But the difference between this is the airlines, for instance, they didn't cause this. It's not the hotels and airlines' fault that
for once.
that a pandemic is happening, and a lot of people are saying, and I agree. I've seen a lot of tweets along this type of layout saying $35 for luggage, $50 if you want your legs to be able to fit in the seats. Oh, and hey guys, remember back there we said all that? Well, can we have some trillions of dollars, please? Yeah, airlines are garbage, but they didn't cause this. They didn't know the coronavirus was coming, and you can't shut down the airlines. Also, all these stores and small businesses, they didn't cause this either. If we were to give people money, it wouldn't be a bailout. This isn't a bailout because we
No,
didn't cause the hurricane.
it's more like unemployment insurance, really. I mean, and that's something that we do if someone loses their job unexpectedly. I mean, not under every single circumstance, but often, if you lose your job through no fault of your own, you can apply for unemployment, and that's not universal income. That is an emergency supplement to keep you going until you find another job. And that's the idea, because this is eventually, we're not going to be like this in quarantine all the time. It's going to go away eventually. But unless we go all the way like Italy and saying like, okay, no one has to pay their mortgage, like, the power companies aren't going to turn off your, like, we're not there yet. At least I don't think we
And
are.
that will backfire.
Yeah.
That I'm not for.
Yeah.
That
Because
will.
if we just decide that, okay, everything's free during the quarantine, no one is ever going to go back, or like it's going to grind
But
everything to a halt.
unfortunately, what we did was brilliant. We said you can't be evicted. Your mortgage can't be foreclosed upon. Okay,
Hmm.
for the duration of this time. But saying that everything's free, that means that you don't owe back pay to your landlord. And a lot of landlords, like for instance, the foreman on my job site right now, he's 64 years old. He owns two rental properties out in Monongahela, which is like, it's trash. It's nowhere. It's like nowhere, USA. He owns 2 rental properties. He has 3 tenants. He's not a rich man by any means. This is crushing him. If you were to tell his tenants that they didn't have to pay him, he would eventually have to. Even right now, we're saying no mortgage foreclosures. But if everything was free and there was no back pay, he'd have to foreclose after all this when you're allowed to foreclose on people.
Yeah, because it's unsustainable. It's just not. I think that a lot of people on the right are having issues with this because it just, to them, I think maybe they're thinking, as you said, that this is like Yang Gang style UBI. And as we said, it's not. This is an emergency. It's not a bailout. It's like a lifeline. It's like a life preserver. Eventually you have to take the jacket off because we're not going to be underwater the whole time. The left doesn't have an issue with this because, of course, the left loves money. And I'm not going to lie, like, I'm fortunate enough to be able to keep working right now, but it's something that would help me out quite a bit too right now because, like, even though I get to keep working, I am, this has been hard for everyone. And
right. Well, think about this. I was talking to a friend of ours, actually probably a friend of a lot of people in this podcast. I'm not going to name her, but she was talking about, I mean, she's the sole provider for her children.
Mm-hmm.
There's no man in her life. It's just her and her kids. And if, like right now, people like Ben Shapiro and all the radical free market
ultra libertarians.
well, and they call themselves conservatives. No, a conservative conserves. If you want to conserve free markets, right now, there are single mothers that can't afford diapers for their children. Mm-hmm. If you allow this to go on how it's going, and everyone's looking around, they're bone broke. They can't afford anything. The government's bailing out all the businesses, but they're not bailing out the citizens. And then they see people like that, not Lockley, whatever, the Kelly L something. She's the senator who, her husband is the chairman of the New York Stock Exchange. She sold $1.5 million worth of stocks almost half a day after going into a coronavirus briefing by the Senate. She dumped all of her stocks, all of them.
Isn't that
raping our economy? And now she's claiming, oh, it was a third party that did it. This woman is a smoke piece. She's like a prettier Ann Coulter. She's like 6'1", drop dead gorgeous, blonde. Her husband is like 5'6", bald, 60-something, fat and ugly, and the chairman of the New York Stock Exchange. If you think that this woman didn't know what she was doing, she's a predator. She knows what she's doing. But my point is this. Capitalism does work. Free markets do work. But if you want people to run to socialism, let them see our politicians dumping their stocks on insider trading. Let them see us bailing out the airlines while they can't afford diapers.
Yeah,
and watch how fast they run from capitalism.
It goes beyond optics and it goes into just straight up hypocrisy. Like if we say that we're trying to keep our economy going, our economy is more than just, the top tier businesses and wealthy individuals. It's everyone, because we cannot survive as a financial oligarchy. We're not Russia. We're not China, because that's what they have over there. They've got a small group of people that basically control the entire economy and have most of the money, and everyone else just sort of is fighting for the crumbs. We aren't like that. We, despite all the talk about our middle class being in decline, and it is, but there's still a lot more people that have a lot more capital and a lot more power economically in America than in most countries.
It's the old adage about how, yes, our 1% has a gajillion dollars, but our poor have iPhones.
Yeah, that is well said. Very well said. Because, yeah, that's something you find in other countries. People like to talk about China and their middle class, but, look at the difference between their middle class, where they have, nice things, and frankly, it's not that impressive if a Chinese person has an iPhone or something like that, since it's made there. So, they probably just got it out of the stock room or something.
Along with all of our medications.
Yeah, I know. Plus, the Chinese government loves to let people make fakes, so they fake everything over there. But look, anyway, that wasn't the point, though. Look at how the poor in China live. I mean, they live crammed together in tiny little multi-generational brick boxes, living on like a little bit of rice a day. Like if they're
And they
forced.
gave up on brick a long time ago. The
Mhm.
drywall they use has they're still using asbestos and stuff as insulation.
Oh God, yeah.
They are something else. But right,
Have,
the difference is if you go into uh, Compton, for instance, let's just a stereotypical ghetto.
mhm.
You will see people living better. Literally, I'm not saying this isn't hyperbole.
It's not saying it's
Living
good.
better than the middle class in China.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Our poor lives almost as well as the affluent in most socialist and communist countries.
I mean, look at Africa, for instance. Like to use the best example, really, because I mean, Asia is Asia. They've always been kind of fucked. But I mean, you look at like the way people live in Africa. Like there is nothing like this in even the best African countries, like Nigeria, South Africa, about 10 years ago, before they completely lost their minds. Um, I mean, people live literally. The difference is like you have like basically warlords living in giant palatial estates, and then people living in uninsulated tin boxes, which let's just call them what they really are, which is human convection ovens.
And they are. And you know what? The big thing is when people were showing pictures of barren, just totally butt naked grocery store shelves and saying, "Oh, when capitalism gets hit by even a little bit of a pandemic, look what happens." So I personally took a picture of my grocery store. There's a meat section that was totally barren. It was just done.
Yeah.
No pork, no beef, no chicken. All of it was gone. And the toilet paper was gone. The wipes were gone. And people were like, "Oh, look." And I was like, "Yeah, that is kind of fucked up." I went back 2 days later. Meat was restocked. And so I have 3 packs of toilet paper right now, which I don't need. But because they restocked it immediately. The difference is in socialism, which they're trying to push on us through this crisis.
That's the norm.
It's the norm.
Whereas this is an extreme case caused by people panicking and not behaving in everyone's best interest.
And have you seen the shelves of, all right, so the shelves of our grocery stores hold 50 brands of toilet paper. They were all gone. How does every neighborhood have the capital to be able to buy out stores, whole entire grocery stores of toilet paper?
Gets the nog jogging.
And so, but my thing is, the big problem is we don't have it's like we talked about in the last episode. We don't, because diversity is not our strength. Sorry. Katz is so pissed I'm bringing up diversity. Because it isn't, and this is the truth, we're all looking around at each other and we don't care. We don't look at each other as a melting pot. We don't look at ourselves as a fondue. We look at ourselves as brand of cheeses. And so we have no care for our fellow man. And that's the truth. And right now, these diehard conservatives, these principled conservatives, like, and by conservatives, I mean liberals, like Ben Shapiro, Bill Kristol, people like that, they're saying, "Oh, well, the free market, just let them go, all these stipends and things to help out the poor and the middle class to get them back on their feet after this because people are being decimated." No, that's communism. It's not. It's nationalism. Nationalism allows the free markets to thrive in times of peace, but at war, you need to get going, and this is war.
You have to protect the stability of your country, and that means that sometimes the government has to behave like a government. I feel like
And that's not socialism.
No, it's not. That's a responsible country, because it's sort of like okay, I'm going to nerd out for a second, and I'm going to take this into the sci-fi realm for a second. But
here comes the bullshit.
So, like Star Trek, one of my most beloved series of all time, real Star Trek, not that bullshit on CBS All Accent with the Black Michael woman and Picard as an old buffoon.
You guys know the show that's almost as good as Firefly and Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, the real stuff, not this new bullshit that they're making. But anyway, not the point. The Federation is often held up as like a paragon of like what humanity could be like, and they show this incredibly evolved human race with ethical people. And the problem is that sometimes they show the downside of that, which is that you have people that are clinging to their ethics at times where it's just not practical. Voyager, for instance, like Janeway had the ship in the other side of the galaxy, and she had the opportunity to go home, but instead she decided to do the moral thing and destroy the means to go home so that she could protect innocent people and condemn her crew to a 70-year voyage. Now, yes, that makes for a great, compelling story. It's, great entertainment, but that's not the way a real government, like if Janeway, replace Janeway for the government for a second, a government steps in and says, okay, no, like that may be our principles, but this is not the time to be that way. Like you can't have like a free market capitalist ethics ethos going on in the middle of a pandemic crisis. You need to have someone like the government or the rules, someone saying like, okay, no, you can't buy all the toilet paper. You can only buy 2 because we need to make sure that everyone has it. Someone has to be the grown up in situations where everyone starts panicking and acting like children.
But unfortunately, it opens doors, and this is the fear, and I have the same fear. I was actually just talking to Mr. Sutherland, as I told you. We were just talking on the phone, and we were talking about how the government fucking sucks, and it does. And they're rolling tanks out, and they're bringing the National Guard in, and they're keeping people in their homes. The problem is, a lot of these powers I disagree with, but a lot of these things I don't right now.
Yeah.
My issue and the fear of a lot of libertarians and conservatives is that these powers are going to be extended, kind of like the Patriot Act, which was just a prophylactic to make sure 9/11 didn't happen again.
An
Yet
emergency
somehow,
response that never went away.
And it never went away, and that's the problem. Powers, this is the smartest thing anyone's ever said about government. There are 2. Besides Lenny Bruce's take away the right to say fuck and you take away the right to say fuck the government. But the other main quote that I love is any power you give to the government, you never get back. And it's a fact. When you give people power, they either keep it or you have to take it back by force. And that's right now is the issue. And I get that. But there are people suffering. And we will not. There are people that didn't deserve this. None of us deserve this, but they don't deserve this. But it's happening to them anyway. So many people are laid off. My mother is in the scrap and steel industry. There's a guy who owns 2 mills. He's owned these mills for almost 40 years or 30, I forget, 30 or 40 years. And his 2 mills, he's had to lay off over 100 people. 100 people. He's known some of them for over a decade. So I don't care what any free market conservative says. If I'm a bad conservative because of this, then I'm not a conservative because we need to help people. I don't care.
I think maybe another way to think about it is picture the economy kind of like the freeway. Everyone is driving more or less at the same speed, but people, they speed, they slow, they change, they get off the road when they want to. Like, there are some rules, but generally speaking, depending where you live, people are just sort of going about their business, driving as they see fit. The only time that it becomes a problem is if they start colliding with each other. And usually, people, they'll sort it out themselves, they'll exchange insurance and all that. But sometimes there's a major pileup. Like if a semi gets derailed, if a semi flips over, you can't expect people to sort that problem out themselves. You need to have extraordinary measures come in. You need police officers, you need paramedics, you need to have people come in, close the road, move things aside, direct traffic. And that's not the way you want it to behave normally, because that really impedes the flow of traffic. But at the same time, when there's a say a semi, like an oil tanker or something, flipped over, that's a major hazard to everyone. And people saying like, well, I need to get to work. Like, how dare you stop me from driving the way I normally do? I always drive this road. It's like, okay, yes, you're right. You do need to get to work, and
But look at that carcass over there.
yeah, it's like, okay, but yeah, that tanker is going to explode, and then you'll never go to work. So
Well,
that may not
well,
be
that's you want to know why that's the best point?
what.
Because that encapsulates what I wanted to say. That all right, so we're conservatives. We're right wing, we're conservatives. Libertarian leaning conservatives, a lot of people, I like to think of myself as a Trump Republican. Or not a Trump conservative. I'm not a Republican. But we're not anarchists. This is the thing. We're conservatives. We like free markets. We like liberty. We like freedom. But we're not anarchists. If we were anarchists, we'd call ourselves that. This is the function of government. I believe in almost no taxes. I believe in unlimited freedoms, basically, for gun rights, for speech rights. But if I wanted to say that the government has no purpose but to pave my roads, I'd basically be an anarchist. I'm not. This is the time where government needs to be allowed powers.
That's what
Now,
it's for.
if conservatives want to have a voice in how the government's going to react, then we need to come to the table. We can't just say, no, freedom. Freedom, freedom is not going to cut it right now. You want freedom? Okay, let's take away all the police. Let's take away all the aid. Let's take away all the assistance. And God bless you on your way to the grocery store, because good luck.
And that's an interesting point. Like, why do, I've heard that in some areas the police are talking about gradually withdrawing or reducing services.
Philly's not prosecuting any nonviolent crimes, and my cousin is a Pittsburgh police officer, and I said, "Are you pulling people over? Are you being safe?" He goes, "How could I pull people over? We're in the station waiting for calls." I was like, "Wait, so no one's?" He's like, "Maybe the state police will pull you over, but city cops are not doing ticketing right now for cars at
And
all."
we're sort of cheating because we're getting very close to that which we said we wouldn't talk about. But that it ties into what we're talking about, how like if people want to experience what a more libertarian and cap type society will be like, well then welcome to a world where the police aren't necessarily there when you need them. Welcome to a world where you are you're an island, you're on your own, and it's not a world that we want to live in. The conservatives, the difference between the conservative and the liberal perspective is that the conservatives want the government to be held at arm's length, and the liberals want to just embrace it so tightly that there's skin to skin. And there has to be a balance between the two, and there are times where you want the government to hug you, like when you're about to fall off the cliff. You want the government to grab you with both hands and yank you out of the abyss, but you don't want them to not let go and not let you walk away from that either. So we have to be wise, and we have to be I don't know what we have to be careful, and we have to be wise. We want to get through this, but we don't want to create a monster either.
And I just want to say, and we'll end it here because we're going over our allotted time, aren't we?
We're close.
So you can riff off this real quick to take us out. Conservatives believe in the Second Amendment pretty strongly. A lot of my friends are texting me pictures of their new guns and stuff. I actually, unfortunately, I have my firearms, but I couldn't go get ammo or anything. I'm pretty low, to be honest. I went out to my uncle's cabin and I blew out a lot, but I'm fine. But my point is, right now, a lot of people are buying firearms, and a lot of Democrats are buying firearms. And we've been talking a lot about the right and our response and our responsibilities to be flexible. But I also would like to point out that right now in California, with the lockdowns and the crime is outrageous. If you've seen the videos, it's very scary. I would not want to be in California. You're in California, but not you're.
I'm at the periphery and in
right.
a pretty locked down area.
And thank God, so are our other friends. But the lines to get into the firearm store are around the block. Democrats probably are 90% of them because conservatives already have their guns.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to also point out that to the Democrat issue of this, when the police tell you, I'm sorry, but we can't help you during this, and crime is rampant, their first thing to do is to go buy a firearm. The things they rail against constantly. And I mean, you're an ex-Democrat. Do you see how now? I mean, you've grown like immensely in a short amount of time. But do you see now the strength of the personal liberty, personal protection argument? Now that the cops are like, we don't want any trouble, we're out of here.
No, I totally see it. And it is extremely telling that so many people who were either completely neutral or probably anti-gun, now that they're in a situation where they're having their the feeling of protection is being withdrawn, because that's really what the police are. It's a feeling, a shield that we can take with us, and we feel safe knowing that we can hit 911 and someone in blue is going to show up and save us. And without that, we all of a sudden realize that we are actually very alone. And the idea of mutually assured destruction, of knowing that someone is going to think twice about robbing you or attacking you because they might be risking grave harm, it's very comforting. It kind of reminds me of they talk about security theater in the airports, how a lot of the TSA safety measures don't necessarily work, in that they don't necessarily find a lot of people and terrorists and weapons that way, but it makes people feel incredibly safe going through all these procedures, which is counterintuitive. But that's kind of like what the police are like, because I live in a city of several, like, I don't know exactly how many people live here, but let's say that's about less than 100,000 people. There are probably only a few hundred police officers. So if total anarchy broke out, realistically speaking, I mean, the police are outnumbered, hundreds to one or more.
And take that 100 and divide it by the amount of people who are going to say, fuck that. This isn't Sparta. We're running.
So it's an idea of security, because the police are a very limited resource. They can't be everywhere at once, and we don't want them to be everywhere at once, because then we'd be China. And even in China, they don't really have that. Otherwise they would need to have cameras everywhere. But we really need to appreciate at times like this how good we have it, and understand that it's something that needs to be protected, and it cannot be taken for granted.
But wait, real quick, I have to jump in, because what you were saying about it's the illusion of security. The TSA is the most brilliant analogy, because I saw those reports and I saw those videos. It's like one of our people that we watch made a video showing that lots of people get by with they almost find nothing, things do happen on planes and they don't catch them. Like if someone wants to get something on a plane, they'll catch you. And the illusion of the police, until a pandemic happens and the police are like, I'm not coming near you. You might give me a pandemic disease. Mm-hmm. The illusion is what keeps us secure. And that's how the left lives. They live under the illusion that there's this great, they replace God with government. There's this great government in the sky somewhere in DC, and they're going to make sure I'm safe, and the police are going to make sure I'm safe, until they don't. And Tucker Carlson was on Thursday or Wednesday, I believe, saying it's your responsibility to protect the ones that are in your charge. It's the man or the woman of the house or the family or the parents. You're in charge of your security. In times like this, you need to just wipe away the illusion of government forever. You need to look around and say, we're in a pandemic. Things are going really bad. And the police are leaving. Lots of cops are retiring or quitting. Or whole police departments are saying, we're not coming near the public. And now you're in charge of yourself. Where's your God now? I wish the left would take a really, really good look at what's going on right now, because this is the reality of government. It's there for you until it isn't. You are in charge of your own liberty, safety, and security, and your families as well. It's something to think about.
And I do think that this is what I want to end on. But for all the negative stuff that is happening right now, all of the craziness, all of the strife that people are going through. And I almost hesitate to call it, I mean, other than the being laid off, this isn't really as bad as it can be. And maybe it'll get worse. But I, and you can tell me if you think I'm crazy, I really think that at the end of this, we're going to come out so much stronger and so much better than we were before. Because yes, the economy is going to take is going to take a hit, but big but the American medical system, I was talking about this with my dad, is being overhauled in a way that hasn't been in a very long time, and it's been needing it. The American medical system is a decrepit corpse that has been like dragging its feet through bureaucracy and insurance fees and lobbyists for the last 30 years. I mean, we're still very much stuck in the 80s. Now, with the idea that we're going to be bringing back medical manufacturing, now that telemedicine is going to become much easier, because the main reason that we don't have telemedicine, cheap, reliable drugs, is not because these things are impossible. It's because of red tape, because of entrenched lobbyism, because of just bureaucrats trying to, make sure that everything stays more or less the same. The medical system is being essentially, Trump is taking a sledgehammer to the old medical industrial complex, and we're using the technology and the resources that we have now to make something that is much more dynamic and much more modern than what we had before.
I was going to disagree with you, but when you were starting, I'm glad I didn't. But when you were saying we're going to be, better, yes, people are laid off, but we've realized that over 90% of our medicine comes from China. Mm-hmm. We don't even make aspirin in this country anymore, period. All antibiotics, insulin, inhalers. So we're going to get on top of that. And also, this is a global pandemic. It's not a national pandemic. So everyone's economy is getting crushed right now. So when the recovery happens,
we're going to see time.
It's not only is it the perfect time to strike and bring our shit back, and I think this is going to be a blessing in disguise as well.
All over the world, I think this will happen.
Yeah, I agree, but I think that we're going to see that the economy that Trump and his administration has built, we're going to get to see which global economies recover the fastest. And ladies and gentlemen, it's going to be ours.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the biggest wake-up call the entire world has ever had about China, because China has been hoodwinking all of us for decades, saying, "Oh, of course, we love everyone. We can do it for you. Like we are your, we are your universal factory. We can do it cheaper, easier. You don't need to worry about it. Just relax." And then when the shit hits the fan, they say, "Well, yes. Oh, by the way, we're keeping all the medical supplies, and if you fuck with us, we are going to cut you off from all your medication." And everyone's going to realize, like, wait, what the fuck? My dad said something about medicine the other day, which I couldn't believe. So when my dad was a doctor during the 80s, my dad recently retired. And he told me is that back when America used to make all of its own medication, we used to make it in Puerto Rico before they changed. I think it was actually the Republicans, believe it or not, but Puerto Rico used to be a tax haven for most American medical companies, like aspirin, ibuprofen, antibiotics, insulin. Almost everything was made in Puerto Rico, where we lived at the time. And he said during the 80s, when we were making our own medicine, he could not remember a single major drug recall, not one. And how many times have we had stupid things like Zantac with impurities, bad batches of this medication, recalls on this, brand names, not even just cheap generic stuff. And it's because the Chinese, they can do it cheap because they don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck about themselves. They don't give a fuck about anything. All they care about is making a short-term profit. And if they create poison, contaminated, whether it's contaminated dog food or contaminated aspirin, they don't care, because at the end of the day, it's just about making a buck and getting ahead. And every country has got to realize that we are better off. Some things are not meant to be cheap. Some things are meant to be safe, and medicine is one of those things. Sorry, that was a rant.
To give our only geopolitical foe the ability to cut off our medicine is so absurd. It's lunatic. It doesn't make sense. And our elites sold us out. Our government sold us out. And I don't care what anyone says. This will be the end of globalization. This is the greatest hit that the globalists took. This is like Brexit and Trump put together. What's happening to the American and the West's idea of what globalists are and what globalization is. The Ben Shapiro, Bill Kristol, Mitt Romney type conservatism where, oh no, let China in, more free market the better. What does it matter if we give all our jobs to India and China? We'll get our goods cheaper, so our citizens will get cheaper plastic goods. This is the biggest hit they'll ever take. I don't think they'll ever recover from this. And right now, nationalism is winning. And that is as good a place as any and to leave, and thank God indeed. So please hit that like, share, subscribe thing.
Yes.
And
disseminate this podcast with the same ruthless efficiency of the coronavirus. Infect everyone with this podcast. Kaggot ever.
Pandemic podcast.
Pandemic Kaggot. The Kaggot pandemic.
And I hope everyone's staying safe out there and that you still have your jobs. And if you don't, we have $280 put together from different friends. If anyone is really in danger or in dire need of food or anything, hit me up. You know how to find me on DM. So I am Jewpiter, and I am taking us out for once. This is AreCatsGay, the sunniest man alive. And we love you. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.